What is the day-to-day like as an Uber driver and as a Lyft driver? What's your average day like? In this video, I'm going to make it very raw and unedited, a very fireside chat style video where I'm going to tell you exactly what it's like. This is a question I think a lot of people want to know when it comes to, like, say, being a beginner Uber and Lyft driver, or like say you've never driven before. Like say you're curious about driving, or like say you're just not curious at all, but you're just wondering like, okay, Uber and Lyft is everywhere. What is it like for the average driver? What is your day-to-day like? What are passengers like? What is driving like? What are the logistics like? What is the money like? And so much more. All those questions, going to be answered in this video. So starting off from the get-go, at this point, I'm assuming, let's say, to make things very easy, you're signed up, you're an Uber and Lyft driver, you have both apps on your phone, and a huge pro tip I'm going to give, and I will give you pro tips or unique little fun facts about being a driver, sign up with both apps. That's the best way to make the most amount of money as an Uber driver and as a Lyft driver. So you have both apps on your phone, you're signed up, you have your own car, you are ready to go. So what do you do first? Well, here's where things get kind of interesting. Again, I'm going to give you some unique behind the scenes stuff. You want to focus on mainly the peak hours. You don't just want to turn on the app whenever you want or turn it off whenever you want. Although maybe, I'll talk about that a bit later in this video because again, there's a lot to being a driver that I think most people don't know about. They know the basics, but maybe not everything. Now, the first initial thing, Uber and Lyft 101, to make the most amount of money, you want to drive what's called the peak hours. This is when people are ordering Ubers and Lyfts the most. The most amount of people are ordering it. And so what Uber and Lyft does is they say, hey, we're going to charge the passengers more because there's a lot of people ordering. There's a high demand right now. And that allows us to pay the drivers more so we can get more drivers on the road to go and pick them up. This is called dynamic pricing, right? Everyone knows this when it comes to ordering an Uber or Lyft. So what happens is, as a driver, before you even turn that on, you think to yourself, well, is this a good time to drive? Now, some drivers have a strict schedule, other ones don't. In case you didn't know, Uber and Lyft is instantaneously flexible, meaning it's not like every Sunday, and I have had comments about this or questions saying, hey, Mark, well, do I have to tell Uber and Lyft when I'm going to drive? Do I say to them like, hey, I'll drive this Friday and Saturday night. I'll drive this Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. No. You can turn on the app at no warning to Uber and Lyft whenever you want. You can turn it off at no warning to Uber and Lyft whenever you want. It is truly instantaneously flexible. Like, it's the closest thing to being your own boss without actually being your own boss. So, the peak hours, the best times to drive, typically, not always, but typically, is morning commutes. So about 7 to 9 a.m., evening commutes, 5 to 7 p.m., and then Friday and Saturday nights. Basically, I'd say around 9 p.m. till about 3 a.m., Friday and Saturday nights. Now, there are other times. For example, Saturday and Sunday mornings can be great. Like, say people are waking up and going to their friend's place because they crashed their night before, and they're leaving their friend's place, to go back to their place. Or people are going to brunch, or especially here in LA. Big thing I've noticed in Southern California, this didn't really exist in Boston, and I initially was a driver in Boston, is Sunday fun days are a big thing. I feel like in Boston, Sunday fun days, I never even really heard that term, but here in Southern California, huge thing, right? So Sunday fun days sometimes can be surging, right? In addition, also the pregame hours. So for example, I find like 5 to 7 or 5 to 8 on a Friday and Saturday, people are not drunk yet because I know some people ask what it's like to drive around drunk people, and I'll talk about that. But 5 to 7, 5 to 8, people are not drunk yet, but they're getting picked up and dropped off to go to their friend's place to start drinking. I call those the pregame hours. Sometimes the pregame hours can pay a lot of money. Sometimes even more when it's compared to like a deep night of, let's say, midnight or 1 a.m. So it does depend, right? But those are the best times to drive. So initially, when it comes to like, what is it like the day-to-day like as an average driver, the first thing you think about is, when do I want to drive? And like I said, some drivers drive whenever they can. But I think most drivers, especially those who want to make the most amount of money driving for Uber and Lyft, well, they go into it very smart and almost like making a chess move. They're like, okay, let's start and do the morning commutes, the evening commutes, Friday and Saturday nights. That's the best way to do it. So what happens is you then say, okay, I'm ready to drive. You get ready. You don't really have to get dressed up. This is another question I've gotten, like, do you have to be in a tux or a suit? No, but depending on what type you do, maybe. So if, let's say you do Uber Black or Lyft Black, Uber Lux or Lyft Lux, basically these luxury rides, you probably should dress up. So I will say that, and typically most drivers do. Now, in case you know, there is a spectrum of different types of rides. The most typical is Uber and Lyft, or being more specific, you have Lyft and ordering a Lyft ride, and then Uber, you get UberX. I don't know why they call it UberX and not just Uber. Maybe it's because they want to differentiate Uber being the company and UberX being the most basic ride. But then you can work your way up. You have Uber XL, Lyft XL. Then you go higher and higher to these super luxury options. And depending on what kind of car you own or rent, because in case you didn't know, you can rent a car to drive for Uber and Lyft. Depending on what kind of car you have, might as well just say that, you can qualify for some of these more premium options. And as you can imagine, these are less frequent than normal Uber and Lyft rides, but they pay a lot more. I've talked to some drivers, for example, in Las Vegas. As you can imagine, a very flashy area, a lot of celebrities, influencers, etc., people with money, just high rollers in general. They will order a lot of luxury rides and black rides. And I know some drivers who say, yeah, I only do black and lux because even though I get less rides than a typical Uber or Lyft, they just pay so much more, then better off just waiting for another one to come about. And that makes sense. So once you have your car ready and you're ready, you're dressed up or not, depending on, I think what type of service you are providing, might as well say it like that. You then take the app. You might take both up, depending on the situation, because I will say sometimes Uber pays more, sometimes Lyft pays more. So something to keep in mind. You then hit go. So by this point, I'm assuming, like I said, because I've done videos about the requirements and signing up, but this video I want to focus on the average day as a driver. You already signed up. You're already ready to go when it comes to Uber and Lyft. You hit go. What happens is the app starts searching for different people in your area that are currently ordering an Uber and Lyft. And what happens is the app will then pop one up and suggest it to you. What they'll show you is things like the price, how far is the drive away from you, how far is the drive itself. They'll show you kind of details about the ride. You have two options, as you can imagine. One is to ignore it / reject it. Basically, it pops up and you're like, you know what? Based off those metrics, not really a good ride. Or B, you accept it, right? So let's say in this case, one pops up and it's a good ride. Again, this is something that depends area to area, like where you just kind of get a feel, I think, as a driver, even if you don't know the exact mathematics of if it's a financially good ride, you just got to feel like, okay, wait, $15 for that ride? Yeah, that's pretty good. Wait, $15 for this ride? Oh no, that's a ripoff. Because in case you didn't know, as a side note, and again, I'm giving you a lot of behind the scenes stuff, there's something called algorithmic wage discrimination. Huge phrase, algorithmic wage discrimination. All that means is this: Uber and Lyft not only has dynamic pricing for the passenger, but dynamic payouts for the driver. They are currently testing, and they're doing this a lot with like AI and algorithms and stuff, to see which drivers will accept anything and which drivers are a bit more strict. So what happens is, for the same ride, Uber and Lyft will say, hey, this one driver, we'll pay him $15 because we know they'll take anything. This other driver, we'll pay him $20. This ride is truly a $20 ride, but we know this one driver will probably take it for $15. And they'll send it out to all these different drivers with different amounts, which is kind of annoying. This is kind of a messed up thing that they found in studies that Uber and Lyft is doing to determine, okay, what is the cheapest amount we can pay to drivers? And if one driver is just going to take anything and they don't care, they kind of don't really have a tolerance. They're just like, oh, we'll just take whatever, or they have a low tolerance. But there's other drivers who have a zero tolerance policy towards bad rides. And they say, you know what? I only want the high paying ones, right? So this is a unique thing just to keep in mind that's happening with a lot of drivers, a little behind the scenes information for you. So again, let's say it's a good ride. Jumping back to this example, you accept it. You hit accept. Now, once it accepts, your GPS will pop up, connected to your phone, and you then start driving there. So let's say, you get in your car, you turn on the app, you accept that ride, then you start driving. Pretty standard, as you can imagine. You drive to the person's place. Now, at this point, in case you didn't know, you're not making any money. You only really make money when the passenger is in your car. I know this is a lot of controversy about this. I feel like now it's not as much of a controversy as it used to be. Because I remember back in the day when I first started driving in 2014, 2015, a lot of drivers argued about that, being like, wait a minute. So if I drive 10 minutes to pick somebody up and then they cancel, I literally just made nothing. If anything, I lost money from the depreciation on my car, the miles I just put on, the gas I just wasted, my time I just wasted, right? A good thing is back in the day, or not good thing, but back in the day, you did not get a cancellation fee. Now you do. So I will say that when you go to pick somebody up, you then have two options or two scenarios that happen. Scenario A is they cancel on you. The cancellation fee can depend. Sometimes a few bucks, it can be 5, it can be 10. It's kind of weird, but there can be a cancellation fee. There usually is. Let me put it that way. Second thing is you drive and you pick them up normally. So what happens is you go to their house and you click a button and it says, hey, I'm here. Now at this point, they have, depending on the app and if they used UberX Share or Uber Pool, formerly called Uber Pool, or if they, depending on the situation, they have anywhere between, like, say, 2 and 5 minutes to then come out. So you're basically just sitting in your car waiting for them. Sometimes you could text them on the app. You could sometimes call them, however you see fit, or you just sit there and wait. You don't do anything. Then the person gets in your car. You say, hey, what's up? Like, I'm Mark, nice to meet you. You want to make sure you double check on their name. So they say, hey, wait, Amanda, Tom, Mike, whatever. You want to double check on their name just to make sure you're picking up the right person. Typically in a morning commute, not as much of an issue, but on Friday and Saturday nights, there is one huge pro tip I've given to never even mention your name. You just say, hey, what's your name? And they say, I'm Becky. And you're like, oh, Becky, actually, I'm supposed to be picking up Amanda. I think you're in the wrong Uber, right? People are drinking. They're going to be trying to find the car, right? So you want to make sure you have picked up the right person. At this point, you then hit on the app, I picked up the person. You then start driving. You drive to their place, and you drop them off, and you continue this, right? So that is kind of the main course of action of Uber and Lyft. And then whenever you're done, you hit a button on the app saying, I'm done or I'm completed, and that's it. Now, here's some other unique things that happen when it comes to Uber and Lyft of what are passengers like? What are other kind of unique things? Now, first off, I guess starting off with, before you even start driving, a lot of people want to know what should you have in your car. I've talked about this before in a few different videos. One, I don't know if I'd call it in your car, but just in general, have rideshare insurance. Your auto insurance might or might not cover you if something happens when driving. So I suggest to all my rideshare drivers have rideshare insurance on top of your auto insurance. Second thing, have a dash cam. Things can happen when you're driving. Accidents, things inside of your car as well. So get a 3-way dash cam or 2-way dash cam at least. One that records the outside of your vehicle and one that records the inside of your vehicle, especially with audio. So just in case something happens, a dispute with a passenger, etc. And then the third thing is a phone charger and phone mount, right? I feel like most people do have a phone mount, but in case you don't, just get one because everyone uses their GPS on their phone anyway. And then a phone charger especially might not be a bad idea to get two. Like get like one of those splitters that has multiple USB ports and you can have a cord that you can hand back to people and then a cord for you just plugging your phone in at all times. That way your phone, of course, doesn't die if it's running Uber and Lyft and a GPS app and like Spotify and Pandora to play music. So those are things you definitely should have in your car. Now, in terms of driving itself, how much money do you get paid? Like, so out there as well, kind of be explaining you again what the average is like. The average Uber and Lyft driver makes about, I'd say, $20 to $25 an hour. That's what it also was in 2014 and 2015. There's an asterisk on this, so I'll talk about that in a second, but that's the average amount. And that's kind of ridiculous, right? I mean, if you think about it, 2014, 2015, 20 to 25 an hour on average was pretty good. Now, though, almost a decade later, not as much. And this is the big thing. I've talked about this in a couple of videos. I call it the triple or maybe the quad threat, where one, Uber and Lyft in general is paying less per ride now. Two, Uber and Lyft is now taking out a bigger cut. In 2014, 2015, in case you didn't know, Uber and Lyft took out 20%. So if I made $100, they would get $20, I'd get 80. That to me was fair. I'm like, all right, they find the people, they design the apps, right? Works for me. Now they can take out as high as half or even more. So it's kind of crazy. And the third thing is costs in general have gone up. Now, at least at the exact time of this video, I feel like gas is actually a little bit cheaper than it was before. But as we all know, gas can fluctuate. But things like maintenance on your car, oil changes, those things do add up. And especially the depreciation on your car can be huge, heavy hitting, right? And the fourth thing, the quad threat, like I said, I'm going to call it, is too many drivers being on the road. This is another issue for a lot of Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. When it comes to the average day, there are a lot of times, back in the day, this wasn't really an issue. But now, you may be wondering, like, okay, when you finish your ride, what happens? Well, there's two things that happen when you finish a ride. One is the ride ends, you sit there and wait for another ride to pop up. And what's interesting is because Uber and Lyft, I think, is the easiest second job to have, like very low barrier to entry. You know, it's not like you need to have a college degree or anything. Flexible schedule, you can work around any other job. A lot of people are being Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. And it's harder and harder now to get a ride as a driver. That is happening. So two things happen when you finish a ride. One is Nothing. You just sit there and wait for another ride to pop up and you hope you can get one. Secondly, and this is a big thing Uber Lyft has kind of pioneered, I think it was in 2018, maybe 2019. I can't remember when they started to unveil this feature, when the exact year was, but almost like an overlapping thing. Back in the day in 2014 or 2015, and even 2016, I'd say, it would be very black or white. You finish a ride, you wait, you pick a new one. You finish a ride, you pick a new one. Now, Uber and Lyft does this feature to keep it very continuous where they overlap. So before your ride's done, or even when you start the ride, as you start driving, if a new ride pops up that's kind of close to where you're about to drop off that person, you can accept a new ride before your current ride is done. That way you always have another ride going. So I'm like this overlapping feature. I think it's pretty good. I like that idea. It's a lot better, I think, for drivers. That way, the second you drop somebody off, you already have a new ride in queue ready to go. Sometimes you can do multiple even, where you're like, all right, you're like locked in, so really great feature by Uber and Lyft. But like I said, because there's too many drivers on the road and this is becoming more and more of an issue, again, it is tough to say because there are more people signing up to drive for Uber and Lyft than ever before. But there also is more passengers than ever before. It is kind of this kind of tricky game of almost cat and mouse, if I'd say it like that. But in some places, I know some drivers have said to me on this channel, like, yeah, on an average day a couple years ago, no issue getting a ride. It would be always overlapping, like I said. But now, on an average day, I drop off a person, I wait 10 minutes for a new ride. As you can imagine, that can slowly add up and kind of creep in to how much money you're making per hour. Kind of annoying. Now let's move in terms of the average day. What is it really like driving people around? This is like a big question I've gotten a lot. And I think it comes down more to psychology. And I think especially too, if you're going to be driving, you may be worried like, okay, having a new person in your car, you don't know them. Is this going to be a good guy or a bad guy? Is it going to be a good girl or bad girl? You don't know what you're going to get, right? Here's the truth. 99.9% of the time, people are cool. They get in the car. You can read them pretty quickly. And I feel like I might say like 80% of the rides, someone gets in the car, they say, hey, what's up? You're like, hey, what's up? How's your day going? Good, how about you? Good. Kind of the formality, if I call it that. They just go to their phone for most rides. They don't want to talk. They're just on their phone. Now, sometimes people may be talkative. And I think you can kind of read, like that's a big thing as a driver. I remember when I first started driving, I would talk to everybody. I kind of liked having that conversation. Like I used to be a former bartender. I liked that conversation aspect, right? And I remember there was one time I picked somebody up and I started driving and I started asking him questions. And the guy goes, hey man, I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna give you 5 stars. You seem like a nice guy, but right now, I just kind of want to be in silence and play on my phone. And I said, you know what? No big deal, right? So like, I will say, that sometimes as a driver, you need to kind of read the person. That's a big thing. And most of the time, people just go on their phone. Now, sometimes people do want to talk. And obviously, as you can imagine, especially on Friday and Saturday nights when alcohol is involved in general, like let's say it's like St. Patty's Day or like a big day where people are drinking, like people do want to talk and you have wildly crazy conversations. And I'm not going to lie, like it depends on the driver. I know a lot of drivers hate driving around drunk people and I can see why. For me though, and I feel like other drivers, they prefer it. Like I actually like driving around drunk people because you're usually happier. Like I remember one time I was doing the morning commute. Like I still remember this one vividly. This is like in 2015 too. So this is still almost 10 years ago. I picked up a guy, started talking to him, and he goes, hey man, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not in the mood to talk. I have to go into work super early today. I just had a kid. All I want to do is play with my son. But my work is so bad. Right now the office is so bad. I can't play with my son. I just want to listen to music. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, dang, right? At least with drunk people, they're always happy, right? Like no one's excited to go to work, right? Unless you have an awesome job, you're going to something cool, right? Like, so I love driving around drunk people. And I will say too, another big question I've gotten a lot. Luckily, knock on wood, no one has ever puked in my car or had to. But what's funny is I remember one of my good friends, she started driving her second ride ever. Luckily, the girl in her car didn't puke, but she kept having to pull over and stop for her to puke on like the side of the road. So kind of weird that the roll of the dice. I've never once had a puking issue whatsoever, whether someone had to puke or did puke. For her, she just started driving her second ride ever. She had a puking situation. Now, luckily, no one puked in the car. But I will say, in case you didn't know, if you do puke in a car, or like say you are driving, someone pukes in your car, you do get a good amount, but it doesn't really cover everything. Like I think Uber Lyft will give you like $300 or $250 or something like that. But kind of annoying as well, because like you may say like, oh well, $250 or $300, but you have to pay to have that clean unless you can clean it yourself. You have to, take that time out. In addition, if it's a high surge, you might be better off just, than continue driving than getting that lump sum, which seems cool at first. But again, so there are things like that that do happen. But in general, I'd say people are pretty cool, right? We do see these news stories about really negative things happening in an Uber and Lyft. But in an average day when you're driving, most people are just kind of quiet. They kind of sit in your car, or let's say if it's a group of people, they talk among themselves. You then keep driving. You then drop them off. That's kind of it. And so overall, I got to say, when it comes to being a driver, one thing I will say about it, which is kind of interesting to say, is some of it, and I know this sounds weird, is all the addictive. There's something that I know sounds weird that's all the addictive about being an Uber driver and a Lyft driver. And I think the reason why is you turn on the app, like I said, whenever you want, turn it off whenever you want. But a big thing is the fact that you can go out and instantly start making money. I think that's what it is. That that, let's say if you have like 3 hours to kill. You're like, okay, I have 3 hours. I can either watch Netflix, watch a show, or I can go out and make money. Although you're watching Dark, in my opinion, Dark and Breaking Bad, I think are the best TV shows ever made. Although Severance could be one of the best, depending on how the next few seasons go. Severance season 1 is phenomenal, though that's on Apple TV. But anyway, you're like, wait a minute, let me look at my time differently. And this started happening when I first started driving. I'm like, wait a minute, if I have 4 hours to kill, or let's say I have a window, why not go out and make some money, right? And in addition to, in case you know, when it comes to being an Uber driver and a Lyft driver, they have what's called instant cash outs. Meaning, let's say I have to pay off a bill and I'm really tight on money and I need $100 now. I can go out, drive about, let's say 4 to 5 hours, let's say 5 to make it, round up. Drive 5 hours. I hit a button on the Uber app or Lyft app. That money is now instantly not in my bank account. Not in a day or two. It's instantly there. That's pretty awesome, right? That's another thing. I can't think of, like I said, any job that you can instantly start working whenever you want, instantly stop working whenever you want, and then instantly take that money you just made and put it straight to your bank account. That is pretty awesome. And so I will say there has been a lot of controversy in general about being an Uber driver and a Lyft driver. Uber and Lyft doesn't really pay their drivers the best. But if you look at it from a big picture perspective, and this could be a controversial statement if you talk to a lot of drivers or depending on who you talk to, Uber and Lyft is pretty awesome. To be able to work whenever you want, however you want, and have that money instantly in your bank account. It's not hard work. Obviously, you want to be safe when you're driving, right? You are driving a moving vehicle, so you do want to be safe and responsible. But, it is a pretty awesome job that doesn't require a college degree. I mean, if you think about it, I've seen, I'm a former accountant. I have an accounting degree. I've done accounting videos on this channel, for example, even. I see some bookkeeping jobs or some entry-level accounting jobs that say, hey, you start at $20 an hour, you must have an accounting degree. And I'm like, okay. Or I can make $20 to $25 an hour, maybe even more, if I drive in the peak hours, focus on the bonuses and incentives of Uber and Lyft, which is another big thing. But I don't need a college degree. I don't need to go to 4-year university. I don't need to be put in a ton of student loans or student debt. Uber and Lyft might be a better option. And I think that's a cool thing too, especially as well, the instantaneous of it and the flexibleness of it makes Uber and Lyft pretty awesome. And then one last thing I want to say on this video, which is very important, especially right now, when it comes to what is the average day like? Well, there's one big factor that actually has a big, I might even say make or break if it's good or bad. Is the average day great or not so great? And that is your location. In multiple videos on this channel, I say and this is true, your location is actually the number one factor that determines how much money you can make as a driver. So as you can imagine, all things being considered equal, if you have a driver drive for a certain amount of time, like say Friday from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. in LA versus, I don't know, Dayton, Ohio, the person in LA is going to make way more money than the person in Dayton, Ohio, just because of the location. There's certain locations that pay substantially more. Rideshare, a big kind of rideshare site, has done a lot of surveys and studies to show that, yeah, some places, like the average amount is so little, and in other places, the average amount is so high. This is a big thing to keep in mind as well. Not only when it comes to just the economics of that area, but now the laws, the legislation. This is a big topic of conversation. I've done a lot of news stories about, like, for example, in Massachusetts, they just legalized unions, where now you can have unions for rideshare drivers, the first time that's ever happened. In addition, Massachusetts, in my opinion, the most forward state when it comes to ride-sharing rules, policies, and protections and rights and everything, just put in a minimum hourly guarantee for rideshare drivers of $32.50. That's pretty good of a minimum hourly wage. In addition, rideshare drivers now get paid sick leave, unemployment. They now get benefits like health insurance. Even though rideshare drivers are still independent contractors, they're not employees, they're independent contractors. Rideshare drivers are now independent contractors with benefits. Same thing here in California, right? You had Prop 22 happen, a lot of controversy still around that as well. But now rideshare drivers here in California have benefits as well, a minimum wage, et cetera, et cetera. And so one big thing about what is the average day like? What is the average driver experience when driving for Uber and Lyft? Your location has a massive impact on that. Not just because of the economics, but the legal stuff. And this could change. I do have a theory that in the future, I could see all this kind of wishy-washiness when it comes to Uber and Lyft and ride sharing going from not just the state level, which is what it's at right now, but then I can see it going to the federal level, where federally lawmakers say, okay, Massachusetts is doing this, California's doing this, Oregon's doing this, New Jersey's doing this, New York's doing this, Ohio, I think, is doing nothing. We got to make something that makes sure that all drivers get protected equally across the country. Because one huge factor is your location, like I said, with the economics, how much money you're getting paid. And this is something that has been changing over time. But overall, I'm going to say when it comes to a video like this, just kind of talking very casually off the cusp about what the average day is like, it's pretty great. You meet great people. Most people are kind of quiet. Most conversations are great. Most people aren't really that bad. Like, I personally have only ever had one really bad person in my car. And in hindsight, it really wasn't that bad. She was just kind of a female dog, if you catch my drift. She was just being incredibly rude, incredibly annoying, maybe just, was having a horrible day, that kind of thing. Besides that, though, really not that bad. You make good money, however you want, whenever you want. Gotta say, being an Uber driver and Lyft driver, it's pretty awesome.